We speak to the Western Cape Mobility MEC Ricardo Mackenzie. A very good evening to you, Mr. Mackenzie. Thank you so much for taking your time to speak to us. So as we mentioned, you were able to reduce the number of road fatalities from the 2021-2022 financial year by 40%. What can you do different, or what are you building on this year?
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for having me this evening. What we're doing based on the success of last year, we're building on top of that. So we continue with what we did because that worked, and we're adding additional layers to that. The first thing is that we do is we're increasing the high visibility operations. So across the province, coming in and out of the province, we'll have more high visibility operations. The second thing we're doing, we now have more inter-provincial operations. So our colleagues in the Eastern Cape is working with us with many operations. Our colleagues in the Northern Cape is working with us with more operations. And we also have more of our communication initiatives, pedestrian initiatives, driver awareness, fatigue management operations across the province, including coming in and out of the Western Cape to help enhance what we did last year, because last year worked very well.
And 80% of these road injuries, fatalities, crashes, etc., happen in 6 provinces. Western Cape is one of them. And at this time, you get a huge volume of visitors. I know Gauteng sees a lot of people going to the Western Cape. So what is the plan in managing that? Because that also means more cars on the roads for the Western Cape.
Definitely. What you have over the next 2 weeks, you'll see from around the 14th to the 16th, or the 14th to the 19th, there'll be a massive increase of vehicles into the Western Cape, because it's right after the school close, it's right after the industry close, it's right after probably 60-70% of people go and live in the country. And that is when we scale up in the Western Cape. While most people are scaling down this time of the year, provincial traffic in the Western Cape and law enforcement generally across the country scale up. So there'll be a massive increase. We have nearly 600 officers deployed from now onwards to increase operations on the road, more roadblock, more inter-provincial operations, because that influx of vehicles means more people on the road, and it means more provincial traffic officers on the road to manage more drivers on the road. But also, if I may add, this year we also have technology to help us that we didn't have before. We have 122 advanced vehicles on the roads with in-vehicle technology. That means if you come into the Western Cape, the vehicle will pick up your number plate if that vehicle obviously is within your vicinity, and that number plate recognition goes to our Joint Operations Center, or our transport hub as we call it. And if your vehicle is an errant vehicle, either wanted by SABC or wanted for outstanding vehicles or hijack, we will pick it up, because vehicles that are errant are likely to be involved in unsafe vehicles, whether stolen or hijacked, and those are the first port of call to remove those vehicles off the road. And that is the first time we're using in-vehicle technology this year to build on what we did last year.
I mean, just looking at the Western Cape, as I mentioned earlier, a big tourist destination during this time of year, and it's not just local, as in, internal visitors, but there are also international visitors who come to your town. The beaches are heavily congested. But other than that, what makes your road safety campaign unique? What forces it to be unique, apart from these factors that I mentioned?
What forces it to be unique is the amount of influx of people into the Western Cape. So we have to do what we do differently. Now, normally we do have a 365 days a year campaign, but it is more for internal people in the Western Cape that knows the roads, they understand the road conditions in the Western Cape. And when you have tens of hundreds of thousands of people coming from across the country who don't know the road conditions, who take the wrong turn-offs, who generally, some, if I may say, drive faster than most of us, you have to have more enforcement on the road, more traffic officers on the road, and obviously more people directing you. Because with more tourists, with more visitors, unfortunately comes crime, and come the criminal elements that follow tourists, that follow the busyness. And that is where our in-vehicle technology comes into play, because they can pick up clone number plates, they can pick up hijacked vehicles, and they can pick up vehicles wanted by South African police services.
And how does the justice system then work in tandem with law enforcement officers? Do you have special courts to process some of those that have been arrested? And I was speaking to the Transport Minister just a couple of days ago, and she spoke about zero tolerance. You mentioned the use of technology, but the turnaround time sometimes would have to be different for this period than it would be during the year.
That is, Sophie, one of our biggest challenges, as you know, probably in the country. And that is probably a much longer debate that we're going to have. But once we have the suspect, that then gets handed over to South African Police Services. They are the authorizing authority to process suspects, and they then work with the state prosecutor on that matter. And that, unfortunately, is out of our control. But our job is to make sure the roads are safe. We take the individuals, we process them, hand them over to SABC, and that is where the justice system need to do their part. It is indeed quite sad if you see hardworking traffic officers do their work, take drunk drivers off the road, but 3 or 4 days later, that same person is either back on the road again, or possibly even worse, in another accident and causing severe damage to our economy, killing some innocent individual like yourself going to a restaurant or going to visit friends and family. And that's where the justice system need to play their part. But our part is to get you off the road. If you are an errant road user, to make our roads safer and to ensure we remove you from the road if you are an errant user, because all of us ultimately want to arrive home safely. That is where our festive season safety campaign is focused on, to get errant road users off the road so that hundreds and thousands of other road users who wants to enjoy our roads safely, visit their families and friends safely, get safely home.
And just perhaps to go further into this, when we look at the criminal justice system and just this whole road safety campaign, because I'm interested, particularly in Cape Town, there's the issue of the implementation of the bylaws. And I want to look at just also how not only the courts operate at provincial level, but at national level. There is a rise in assault cases in the Western Cape at this time. So all of this, how does it interact? If Metro Cop officer is there at a time, at a certain place, and they then have to take charge. I want to put the emphasis on road traffic law enforcement, how the law is then interpreted from one place to the other, one incident to the other.
Well, the law is interpreted across the country in the same way. There's only one national law, the National Road Traffic Act, the National Land Transportation Act. The law is interpreted only one way. The problem comes into, like you say, on the prosecutorial side. Once an officer arrests you on the side of the road for whatever violation you've done, that officer has a responsibility across the country, whether the city of Cape Town or city of Johannesburg, to hand you over to SABC, and obviously the prosecutorial procedures comes into play. And that is where the NPA needs to play their part. So when it comes to interpretation of law, the traffic officer, same traffic officer in Cape Town, apply the same law in Johannesburg, apply the same law in Durban, the National Road Traffic Act, the NRTA, and that then gets hand over to SABC as the leading and investigative agency in the country, the only one that can have that kind of power, and that then goes over to the National Prosecuting Authority, which is the only one that can prosecute individuals in the country.
I was asking this question specifically because having been to Cape Town a number of times, these private security companies sometimes do usurp the role of police and rather, should I say, the Western Cape traffic officers. So we'll wait to see and see what the reports we get. So I needed to ask you that, and I'm sure it's something that you've come across.
Yeah.
And we'll talk further about it at some point. Thank you for your time. Western Cape Mobility MEC Ricardo Mackenzie.